Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson was Tommy's 6th grade science teacher. And for the first time in Tommy's life, he was actually enjoying a subject in school other than recess or PE. He liked Mr. Johnson. He liked science. He liked what was going on. He liked what he was being taught. And Mr. Johnson was one of those, was a young guy. He was about 28 years old, had a red convertible sports car. He dressed sharp and had a real good rapport with the kids. He would do stuff that was just out of the box, like other teachers just wouldn't do. He would take them on nature walks. And every now and then, Mr. Johnson would say things like, "Class, isn't it amazing how this bug evolved the ability to fly?" Or, "Class, isn't it amazing how this tree evolved the ability to protect itself from bugs or from fire," or something like that. And it didn't really dawn on Tommy what was going on in those instances until today. Today was very different. Today, Mr. Johnson stood up in class and he said, "Class, we're going to learn how the universe started. Can anyone tell me how that happened?" Eugene Lepton's hand shot up. Eugene sat on the front row. He made a 100 on every science test that there was because he read his science book for fun, unless there was a bonus question. And then he made a 105, and Mr. Johnson, accustomed to Eugene raising his hand, said, "Yes, Eugene." Eugene gave the textbook spiel like he was reading it out of an encyclopedia. 13.82 billion years ago, a tiny singularity exploded in what is commonly referred to as the Big Bang. And went from there and explained that this explosion caused the first element to expand into our universe and to somehow, over multiplied billions of years in random chance processes, bring to culmination humans. And Mr. Johnson said, "That's exactly right, Eugene. Thank you very much." And he was about to go on with his class. Now, out of the 30 kids that were sitting in that class, 26, 27 of them knew that's not what they had been taught at home. In fact, they knew that was very different than what they had grown up learning. Tommy, who was sitting in that class, listening to what his favorite teacher just said was the answer to how the universe got here, knew that what his parents said was very different, and the kids were encouraged when Stephen raised his hand. His dad was the preacher down the road, and Mr. Johnson said, "Yes, Stephen, can I help you?" Stephen, in a brave but kind of nervous, shaky voice, said, well, Mr. Johnson, that's not right." And Mr. Johnson said, "What's not right?" Stephen said, that idea about this big explosion causing the universe, that's not how it happened. Mr. Johnson said, "Stephen, can you tell me how it did happen?" And Stephen said, "Well, my dad says that God created the world out of nothing and he spoke it into existence." And that's what most of the kids in that class had learned themselves. And they whipped their heads around after looking at Stephen to look at Mr. Johnson to see what he was going to do with this piece of information. And they were very surprised when a smile spread across Mr. Johnson's face. And he said, "Stephen, I was hoping someone would bring that up." And he went to the top left drawer of his desk and he opened it up and he pulled out a black leather-bound book. And he said, "Where did your dad get that idea that the universe was created by God?" And Stephen said, "From the Bible." Mr. Johnson said, "Did it look anything like this?" And it did. And he opened it up to that first few pages of the Bible and he started reading, and there were some words like thee and thou and hast and shalt and wilt. And he read a little while and he said, "Class, does that sound old to you?" I mean, for whatever else it sounded old. And he said, "This book is filled with ideas." He said, "Some of them are very old ideas that modern science has disproven." He said, "Some of them are still pretty good. There was a guy in this Bible that his name was Jesus, and he taught something called the golden rule, that you should do to others what you want them to do to you. That's a great rule." But he said, as far as the science behind what's in this book, he said this book, some of it's almost 3,000 years old, and modern science has disproven this book years ago. In fact, he flipped to a passage that talked about the four corners of the earth. And he said, Class, can you believe as he walked over to his globe and spun it around slowly? Class, can you believe that people used to think that the earth was flat and had corners? And with that, he closed his Bible and he put it back in his desk drawer, and he left 36th graders wondering what in the world they were going to do with the most profound question in their entire life. Is there a God? Do you think that happens in our nation? You know, in one sense, that's an illustration. In one sense, that's a made-up story of Tommy and Mr. Johnson. Really no Tommy and no Mr. Johnson. In another sense, not only is it true, but it's true multiple times over every single day across this nation. In fact, I was just talking to one of the men here before I came in, and he was telling me about a young man that he knew who did almost exactly what I just mentioned in that illustration as the teacher was teaching that there was no God, him raising his hand and saying, no, that's not right. And so as we have a more secularized culture, a culture that is being flooded with the idea that there's not a God, that religion is a man-made invention, that the Bible is not God's Word, what are we to do about that? As we start looking at the effect that it's having on our young people, several months ago now, I was scheduled to go speak at a congregation, and I was just going to do some lessons on raising children. Now, you guys know exactly when you need to write any book that you're going to write on raising children. My wife and I had it all under control. We knew exactly what we needed to do to tell people how to raise children, because I was watching many, many years ago my brothers raise their children. And I thought, this is what you guys need to be doing, and had everything in mind that they needed to do to raise their children. And so my wife and I decided that were we going to write a book, we should have written it at the optimal time when you know everything about child raising. Before you have them. That's when you write a book about raising children. At least that's when we thought we knew everything about it. Now, as I was scheduled to go speak at this particular place on raising children, what I knew was I still got a long way to go. My children are 15, 13, and 10. And so if I'm going to tell you how to raise children and mine are in the middle of raising, then it's going to be problematic for you because I haven't figured it all out yet. But I did think, hey, we can go to the Bible and we can get some real good principles on raising children, and we can tell you what God says about that, and that will give you some structure to help you raise your children. So you won't be listening to me and my opinion and my advice. You'll be listening to what God says, right? And so what I thought I was going to do is just do some standard Bible lessons. And what I mean standard Bible lessons, I figured I'd go to Deuteronomy chapter 6. The Shema, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And then he explains, and you shall teach these things to your children. And you know how the passage goes. When do you teach them to your children? When you walk in the way, when you rise up, when you lie down. And then he explained that you need to make sure these commandments are like frontlets on their eyes and like places over the doorpost so that when they go out, they see the commandments of God. When they come in, they see them. And I thought we'd be dealing with, hey, when parents teach their kids something about the Bible, they need to model that for their kids. You know what they say? That kids rarely listen to what you say, but they always hear exactly what you do. And I figured it would be just general Bible lessons. So I wasn't planning on doing any Christian evidences, wasn't planning on talking about any of the stuff I normally do. It was just kind of a special day on raising kids until I started doing the research. And I started looking at what's happening in the religious culture in the United States of America. And here's what I found out. In the religious culture in the United States of America right now, any group that calls themselves a Christian, you're talking about Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, Catholic, etc. Any group out there that says we are a Christian group, they are losing, every single one of them on average, losing 60% of all of their young people age 15 to 25. So if you were to have 15 to 25-year-old young people, if you had 100 of them, in basically 10 years, any religious group that calls themselves a Christian would lose 60 of them. If we had just middle section right here and we had 100 young people aged 18 to 25, and it was like any standard religious group out there calling themselves Christian, you're losing 60 of them in 10 to 15 years. It's pretty dramatic. 60%, 60 out of 100. Now, when I started looking at what the Lord's church is like in relation to that, I found out that we're doing a little better. We're not losing 60%. We're losing right at about 40%. At first, you want to think, oh, okay, great. We're doing better. Okay, so we've got 100 young people, age 15 to 25, 18 to 25 or so, 15. In the next 10, 15 years, out of our 100 young people, 40 of them are going to be gone. It's one thing to give a stat, isn't it? It's another thing to let's take 10 of our young people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Which of those 4 would you like to lose? I think you understand what we're saying. We don't want to lose any of them. We're not wanting to play statistics here. We're wanting to talk about this like we're dealing with real people. Now, if there was something that was killing, physically killing 40% of all of our young people in 10 to 15 years, do you think we'd be concerned about that? Hey, in this congregation, guess what? When we have children, when they reach ages 15 to 25, within 10 years, they die. Do you think there would be some real action taken to curb the death rate of our kids? Do you think that there would be some real research done into what's happening and what's causing this, and we would try to do our very best to change the situation? Absolutely, positively. So when you start looking at why are we losing 40% of our young people? Well, we go to the polls, and here's what we find out about the religious landscape of the United States of America. Go any street, Birmingham would be good. If you went downtown Birmingham, you just start asking people the question, are you affiliated with any religion? 25%, 1 out of 4 say, nope, not affiliated with any religion whatsoever. Not Islam, not Christian, not Hindu, not anything. Now, that's 20%. That's the highest number that our country has ever seen not affiliated with any type of religion. And then here's, when you look at that second stat, 39% of the young people aged 18 through 29 are nuns. 40 out of every 100, virtually, of all of the people in our country who are aged 18 to 29 say we're not affiliated with any religion whatsoever. So let's say we go out to Birmingham city streets and we ask about, it'd take you about 240 people. Ask about 240 people who are aged 18 to 29 if they're associated with any religion, and you're going to get right at about 100 of them who say no religion whatsoever. So think with me. Let's say we've got that 100 of those young people aged 18 to 29, they're not associated with any religion whatsoever, and then we ask them this question. We've got them all here on the side of our auditorium. We ask them this question, how many of you were religious? I mean, what, did you guys grow up in non-believing homes? Were you taught atheism? How many of you out of the 100 that we've got here were religious? And what do they tell us? 64% of them were. Reared in homes, the bulk of which would have called themselves Christian homes. So we've got 100 young people who all say, I'm not associated with any religion. 64 of them say, I was raised in a religious home, and I'm not religious whatsoever now. Okay, so then here's the next question. If you're following along, all right, so we have 100 young people aged, 18 to 29. 64 out of the 100 say, we were raised religious, and we're not religious now. So what's the next question? What does everybody who is serious about what's happening want to know? Okay, if we have 40% of our young people who are dying of some unknown disease, what's the next question? What? What are you dying of? Why are you leaving your religions? And here's what they say. As a part of a new survey, we asked these people to explain in their own words why they're no longer religious. About half of the current religious nuns who were raised in religion and left. So out of that 64, about 30 of them, 32 of them, they say, we left. Why? Because a lack of belief. And many of them included that science was the reason they left. So half of them, half of the 64 that were raised in religious homes who are now no longer religious, you say, well, why did you leave? Well, we just don't believe anymore. Well, what do you mean you don't believe? Well, I don't believe in God. I don't believe the Bible's God's Word. So if you were to correspond that to the Lord's church, that if we're losing 40% and half of those were to say anything like these people are saying, then 2 out of the 4 would say, we just don't believe anymore. And if you were to say, what do you mean you don't believe? Then several of them, many of them, maybe 2 out of the 4, at least one would say, I just don't believe in God anymore. You start looking at the statements that they made. Well, because I grew up and realized it was a story like Santa or the Easter Bunny. What was a story like Santa or the Easter Bunny? The idea that God exists? Well, I realize that religion is in complete contradiction with the rational and scientific world, and to continue to subscribe to a religion would be hypocritical. Now stop right there. Stop right there. Now we've got scores of hours of material that shows that that statement is as false as a statement could possibly be, that the most scientific statement that you will ever utter is that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The idea of atheism and unbelief in evolution violates every known scientific law that it touches upon. The law of biogenesis that says life comes from previously existing life and multiplies after its kind demolishes the evolutionary idea. The law of cause and effect that says that if you have a material effect, you have to have a cause that came before it and that was greater than it, finishes once and for all the idea that this world popped into existence from nothing, which the atheist has to say in order to get anything going. Every scientific, legitimate fact that we know that touches on the issue proves that atheism can't be the case. And that's just not what our young people are being taught, though. They're not made aware of that evidence, and so at schools they're taught religion and God are completely in contradiction with modern science. That's not true. But they're believing that. And this particular individual says it no longer fits what I understood of the universe. Learning about evolution when I went away to college, lack of any sort of scientific or specific evidence of a creator, I just realized somewhere along the way that I didn't really believe. Now, when I was planning on going and doing general Bible lessons, and I started looking into the research and realized we might be losing up to half of our young people due to unbelief, I realized that we've got an issue that needs addressing. And that is that we have to give